Good afternoon, everybody. Actually, when people ask me whether I consider myself a car designer or designer, I always answer a designer. Even though it's true, the last 10 years I mainly designed cars, even some very car-like cars like Ferraris and Maseratis and Alfa Romeos. But I have to admit, I have a kind of love-hate relationship with them. The hate comes from when I look at it from a distance. One cannot deny the problems, the congestion, the pollution, but also the fact that they kind of make some of our environments a bit ugly with all the things that are put out there to guide all those cars. And as I consider that the main role of a designer is to improve quality of our life, of our environment, of our society, I always had a bit of a problem with it, that the fact that as a byproduct of what I do, some of the aspects in our environment are having a bit less quality. But of course, there's also a big passion, almost a love. In my case, that began very early. When I was a small kid, I still remember vividly that moment. I was entering in a barn, a friend of my father's, dusty place, some sun coming in, falling on that old car parked there for years in the corner. I kind of love at first sight. And I scraped together the few money I had, bought the car, brought it home, and I ended up working for 3 years on that car. For most of the people, probably it was just a pile of junk, some metal together, and honestly speaking, it was not even that beautiful, that car. But for me, in a way, it already taught me one lesson. For me, it was about the interaction I had with a character. And that still, for me today, is a lot of the essence of car design. It's about creating a character that you can have an interaction with, that does something to you. But it also probably formed me in a different way, because basically I spent about 3 years under the skin of that car. And since then I've always seen the outer shape as a representation of what is within. It's a communication of what we have within. And that approach translated into my way of working. So when I started working in Pininfarina up until today, I like to design cars and products in general in a kind of transparent way. See all the elements together, because I believe that true beauty can only come when the different aspects of a car are in a coherent way getting together. A coherence that is bundled by one central idea that is related to the interaction we want with that car, between the car and the person. Because the aesthetical appearance, of course, is very important. It attracts you, it communicates, it holds the promise of what pleasure you could derive from it when you see the car. And that was always a very big focus when I designed cars like this Alfa Romeo Duetto Tanto. But once you then get into the interaction of the car, that promise should be fulfilled in a coherent way. You should actually then experience it. Otherwise, you will have just a big disappointment. And how could we speak about beauty if there's a disappointment? So for me, the aesthetical beauty is about communicating the promise for a certain pleasure. And of course, real beauty then is about experiencing that pleasure through the interaction, through the use, and through enjoying what you're using. So that's why also beauty for me is very much related to an honesty. But of course also not only honesty, but also passion and care. And in Italy I definitely learned how important it is to have care in the object, in the surface, to treat those lines, those little bits up until the last millimeter, care about where that tension is. Because in that care, you will also feel when you look at it. And of course, I learned many things. And one probably the main lesson for me, I consider, is that I learned that when you work on that car, on a car like this, of one of the many cars I designed, what you do is always this tiny bit of a much, much bigger whole. Actually, I came to see the evolution of cars as a kind of evolution of the species. 100 years ago, the car was sort of invented. In the beginning, lots of different types of cars were experimented. Today, only few survive. Let me give you an example. The Mini in the 60s was the first car with putting the engine transversal, created more room inside, and also made the car cheaper to produce. Since then, that is the solution for all the cars if it's not a luxury car, because it was the best solution. So there's a kind of convergence towards what seems to be the natural state of a car. A convergence within a bigger force field where there's social, economical forces, enormous pressure on how much a car costs. So what that means is that when you design a car, even if you're there alone on your white sheet of paper, you're not alone. You actually work within a kind of force field. You have to deal with all these forces, aerodynamics, things coming from outside, things you have to comply to. But of course, there's also that inner personal wish and desire to each time again create something that is unique, that we haven't seen before, that arouses new kind of emotions. And each time again, every design, every car is looking for a balance between those two. When those two elements come into balance, your shape sort of is there. But there's one thing in that evolution which in a way I like, because it does lead to a form of beauty. But there's one element that I really don't like, that I didn't mention before. And that is that in that evolution got mixed up also with a lot of rules and regulations. When we design a car, actually there's sometimes 3 people in parallel to us. The only thing they do is check with what we do is actually legal. Checking in a book of rules. I'll give you one example. When 10 years ago there came a new rule to have a better pedestrian safety. So when you hit a person, the person has better a chance of survival or less harm. It's of course a very good objective. But what it means is that since then you actually have to include more or less those 4 red dots you see into your design, 2 points lower into the car, so you don't break your leg into 1 point, but actually throw the people on the bonnet. And then of course offset the bonnet compared to the engine, so when you fall on the bonnet, you relatively fall in a kind of soft way. But what does it mean? You raise the hood. You need to look over the hood, so you also raise the people sitting in the car, so the car gets higher. But of course, we cannot sell a car with worse performances than the car we sold before, so we also widen the car a bit, so in the corners it has the same dynamics. A higher, wider car makes the car more heavy. A heavier car needs bigger brakes, probably bigger wheels. To move all that mass with the same dynamics, maybe we need a bigger engine. If you have a bigger engine, we need to raise a bit the hood. So you understand we get into a loop, a kind of vicious circle that's spinning out, and that has nothing to see with a natural evolution. So here is that image, and what you come to understand is that while at the beginning, right out of university, you start off with all these big plans, these big ideas that, yes, I'm going to change the things from now on. Things won't be so ugly anymore in the environment. But I have to admit that after 10 years and lots of experience on different cars, within a given segment, the room to play as designer is within a few centimeters of a skin, a few centimeters in which you can change the shape. You can play with the surfaces, the reflection, the light, the graphics, and so on. And of course, I'm talking here about real-world design. I'm not talking about virtual flight of fantasies that deny reality, and by denying reality will never have the power to change that reality. I'm talking about designing cars that we can actually produce, get on the road, and actually change that reality. So that's a bit anticlimax, because you study, a lot of passion, you sit there and you realize that, damn, one of the most influential car designers is that guy finding out that rule for the pedestrian impact. So what does it mean? Does it mean that we have to comply to that? This is it. This is what we do. We are kind of fashion designers that drape an aesthetical shape around a body that is more the result of a bigger evolution. From now, for this part, yes, but of course, I wouldn't stand here, I wouldn't do what I do if I believed that that was the end. Because there is much to do, but we need to shift. We don't need to look only at the object. We need to start looking at cars together, not only cars together, or cars, how they mingle together with people, and especially what can happen when we all put them into communication with each other. That is the new future solution field in which we should design, in which we should find solutions for those problems. For example, that safety. If this is the field we look for solutions with, then we don't have to design cars that crash well. We can actually make cars that avoid to crash. Because if they communicate with each other, they know where they are, they have radars for other objects and so forth. So we can turn around that evolution and make cars lighter again. Because cars are also heavy, because we need that one moment of the perfect crash. And we made a small calculation in my office. That means if all the cars around the world, we make them a bit lighter, that would save us about 180 billion tons of metal that is now moved around the globe. That equals a cube of 5 by 5 by 5 kilometers of metal. And the small red thing there at the bottom is the biggest building of Holland. So it gives you an idea of what we talk about is not only then changing safety, but also the huge ecological aspects. We can go on. That ugliness we talked about. If car systems become an intelligent system, why not absorbing back all that ugly infrastructure? Why not showing inside the car whether your light is red or green? Get cars that have better interaction with people, because if they don't have to be designed so heavy, we can go into much more transparency. And believe me, as car designer, that opens up such fields of what we could do with them. Make them more elegant, more transparent. You interact in a different way with people, and you actually arrive at a different behavior when you sit in the car. And that is the best way, for example, to improve safety. We could design whole different types of cars. But it's not about just different types of cars. It's about designing mobility. It's about all the different aspects. There could be an explosion, and we will see an explosion of different things that will come in the field of mobility. It's not only about vehicles, it's about how they're interrelated with our personal devices, how we design the streets, the infrastructure, the services, and so on. And I'm talking here about extending what I see as beauty of the object, the coherence between the different elements, into the field of mobility. So we can talk about a beautiful mobility in the sense that is, through the coherence, it's creating a beautiful experience of it. And so what we actually can say is, yes, on the one hand, that evolution of a car is arriving at a kind of natural point where there is some sense of how they are in the current context. But that, in a way, is still within the context of the industrial evolution. What I think we need to focus at, and where possibilities can be found, is that also with vehicles, we enter into the digital revolution or evolution. Change will not come from within the current context. Change will come because things around will have impact on the car. And the biggest change, the physical change, I think will come from the non-physical elements such as communication. And whatever we do, I think it's very important that we always focus on creating a sense of pleasure, because every change we want to establish will only have a chance to actually happen, to survive, if it's something you feel from within. Without all these talks, without all the considerations, that what you have there in front of you is giving you that feeling that it will improve, give you pleasure, and actually make better the quality of your life. And to do that, at the level of mobility, of course, we need a different approach to what a car designer is. No longer a person only focusing on that aesthetic skin around the object, which, don't misunderstand me, is very important. Just like our clothes are very important to us, the way we express ourselves is very important to us, and I dedicate a lot of my passion to it. But if we really want to move forward and make, on the long term, a change, I think, again, we should focus on designing in that wider scale, where a designer is involved in a much bigger spectrum of elements. It's not only about the object, it's also about regulations and so forth. And with the creative vision, show a path how we can put them together in a coherent way. And when doing that, I hope to be able to once actually make a car like that that will go on the road. And for sure, what I will do is then still focus at the end of this very last detail. Be there to carry that line, to also show in that detail the care and passion that went into it. Because no matter how conceptual or no matter how much you project the ideas in the future, it will always be about also an object that, just like a battery contains energy, contains the passion and the care you put it into it while making it. Ready to be released when somebody else is getting in touch with it and starts to use it. Thank you very much.